Good morning. Welcome to our first breakfast session of this year. The topic we've chosen today is not as much one of the trends, and there are quite a lot of them, interesting trends ongoing, where we can shine a light on as architects. But we've chosen architectural practice as a topic of today. Because main reason, there's quite some interesting stuff ongoing in that domain in most of the organizations that we're active. And in that context, I invited 3 speakers to shine a light on the topic with very complementary cases. So Rudi Serron, IT Director of P&V, will open the session with the story of what is going on in the domain at P&V. Then Laurent will bring us a story about setting up and managing an architecture office in the context of a large carve-out. And Frederic will end the session trying to shine a light or giving a sort of an insight of how we look at the topic, and in that context share some experiences at BNP Paribas. Some practical details, as always. Be aware the presentation is being recorded. Please stay muted during the webinar. But if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask them via the question and answer button. We know from the past that there are sometimes lively discussions ongoing in the question and answer while the speaker is talking. If at the end of the session there's still time, I'll select 1 or 2 questions to be addressed during the session. We'll distribute the material to you, each one of you, via a link in the email. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to ask us. Rudi, are you ready to open the session?
Indeed, and thank you, Bart. So good morning, everybody.
Rudi, you're on mute.
Good morning, everybody. Is now okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry. So I will start tomorrow this session. I will give a short introduction of the P&V group. Who are we and what is our purpose? And then I will explain the use case about enterprise architecture at the P&V group. So P&V, an insurer, Belgian insurer. We are there since 1907, so a long time. Belgian company, and our purpose is to offer protection to as many people as possible. And how do we want to do this? By making insurance accessible and inclusive, by investing in prevention. And all this very important in a sustainable way. And we can only do this thanks to our strong engagement of our employees. Our mission is to provide our customers with the good protection. A good protection, that means that they are well insured, not over or underinsured, at the right price. And this based on our cooperative values. Those values are accessibility, facilitating access to the insurance for everybody as broad as possible, sustainable. This means that P&V is reinvesting in the social economy with the profits that they are making. We focus on prevention. It's better to prevent claims than only to repair them. And this we can do with the engagement of our employees. So our vision by 2030 is to be the insurer that makes a difference in Belgium. Only focus on the Belgian market by offering a large a range of actionable and inclusive protection solutions for as many individuals as possible. And we are doing this, and I'll come back in the next slide, by different distribution channels. So what is our market share? These are the figures of 2022. We are ranked 6th in the Belgian market at that moment. Our aim is by 2030 to be in the top 3. What is our income? We are speaking about figures of 2022, about an income of 1,825 million a year, equally divided amongst non-life and life insurance. And you see a growth. We are very proud of the organic growth that we are having the last years. And we believe strongly that our vision to be in the top 3 by 2030, we can reach it. Spoke about multi-channel. So the P&V group has multi-brands. We have P&V, and that's the brand where we are connecting to the customers via tied agents. We have the brand Vivium. That's a partnership that we have there with the brokers. And then we have other brands like P&P, Imo Assistance, and Arcas that also tends to sell insurance to the customers. It's the customer that chooses his interaction with the P&V group. Could be direct, could be via an intermediary. We call it the digital module. So now enterprise architecture at the P&V group. Something new at the P&V group. We started it up last year. The starting point was that we could say that we had a major solution architecture practice on project level. But typical enterprise architecture concerns were merely considered as being an IT concern. That created some tension between business and IT. Certainly when we spoke about a life cycle of assets or a technical depth about assets, where the business was more focusing on transformation and new capabilities, and we didn't have enough attention on the technical aspects of our assets. And last year, we also implemented a new operational model in collaborating between business and IT. We call it the new Agile, TCNR at the P&V group. That was the starting part. At that moment, we decided also to launch enterprise architecture practice within the group. First thing was to support the new Agile operational model. Second goal was to simplify our application landscape and increase the benefits of our change and run investments. Also, to have a better understanding on what the business value was in eliminating the technical debt and the rationalization of our application landscape. Main goal was also to ensure business continuity. So the risk aspects were also taken into consideration. So enterprise architecture governance as a key ingredient in our new target operating model. We believe strong in the empowerment of the teams, the Scrum teams. So the decisions that can be made within those teams should be made in those teams. We defined from the enterprise architecture the framework, the basic principles that had to be applied. all important architectural decisions are not taken by IT, but in collaboration with the business representatives. Each portfolio has its portfolio architecture review board. On CIO level, and that's the team where I'm also the chairman, we ensure that the overall coherence of that architectural roadmap and compliance-wise, everything is okay. Empowerment of the teams, we believe strongly in this. Only the strategic aspects are escalated to a higher level. So what did we implement during the last year? And where is the focus of the enterprise architecture practice is on the yearly planning, where the team is supporting the making of business cases. And also focusing on the strategy of the business and what are the actions to get there. So we call it the big rocks qualifying. Now, enterprise architecture has a focus also on the life cycle of the assets, and there is also focus on how to rationalize the application landscape. We believe, and that's an aim, that a capability should only be hosted in one asset. One of the goals of the new target operating model was to be more predictable during the delivery. Their enterprise architecture, and it is proven, helps us not only in the yearly planning, but also in the quarterly business review plannings to have better solution outlines that makes that we are more predictable in the delivery. Those quarterly business review meetings, you can also understand them like program increment meetings. So if you look back after this 1 year, the outcomes are that our enterprise architecture roadmap now is providing visibility long term, and we are more predictable in our delivery of changes. We see a higher business value because there are less stop and goes during the execution. The overall cost, IT cost, is getting down slowly. We expect in the next year that we will get more business value, but we also saw that our major incidents were reduced with 50% because the quality, not only the predictability, but the quality of our delivery is much better. Now, what we see also is, as we are working with different portfolios, after the first year, there is no one size fits all for all those business lines, but we are not only focused on the process, we are more focused on the value and how to get there. I think here I'm the end of my presentation. So I'm looking forward to some questions that will pop up, and I give the word on the next speaker.
That would be me. So let me just share my presentation first. There we go. So 50 minutes, right? So thank you. Happy to be here and tell my story. It's a funny story. So some time ago, I ran into someone from my former mission, and he asked me what I was doing now. I answered, well, I'm setting up an architecture office for an international company. Oh, small one? No, not particularly. They have a 1.3 billion turnover, so not small one. Right. And they don't have an architecture office yet? I had to think about that question, to be honest, because indeed, I did not realize, but to start a new architecture governance from scratch in a sizable company, that is something you don't do every day. So usually in any company of appreciable size, they already have architecture managed as a capability. And in this case, we're talking about a company of more than $1 billion turnover. So the question is, under what circumstances in 2024 must you create an architecture practice from scratch? And how does it work? So to answer that question, I need to give you the company context. So the company is active in the medtech sector and located in the US. We can't disclose the name, but the context is important. It's a merger and acquisition context. So more specifically, it's a carve-out context. So the company being the carved-out part. It's quite sizable, so 1.3 billion. It's about 6,000 people that are coming over. And I get to think, no IT is coming over from the mother house. It's a complete greenfield. Whoops, what happened? It's a complete IT greenfield. So the only problem is that the business still need to continue working. So we do have to take over the application. So I guess you could call that an application landscape brownfield. So the challenge is to build an entire IT organization from nothing, not only an architecture practice, but for the architecture practice, it gives a particular context. The context is that we have TSAs in place. So TSAs are transitional services agreement, according to which the carved-out company continues to benefit from services from the carving out company until it is able to start up its own. And bon, next to the business implication of still being tied to the mother house, there are clear financial incentives to exit those TSAs on time. Basically, if we don't do that, it becomes crazy expensive. So lots of priority, lot of pressure. So the priority number one is to exit those TSAs. So that is something that is the undivided attention of the CIO at the moment, understandably. And so we have a TSA exit program, and this is where the architecture practice is being built. If you look at the IT organization today, it's a skeleton organization. So there's not a lot of people. They are fully engaged in TSA projects. And the idea is not to have that grow too much over time. Considering the timelines, we actually don't have the time to build an IT shop of the required size to handle that kind of program or that kind of workload. So the predominant strategy for sourcing is to ask providers, ask integrators to take on specific projects. So what does that mean for the architecture practice then? Well, we have to take the context into account. So at the moment, we have a program architecture office, fully in the change organization, which was totally expected considering the current situation. I need to explain this a little bit. So one of the first topic on the table was, we are building a new organization, a new IT organization. We should go to an agile operating model. Yes. Okay, so how agile should we work at this moment? So let's see. There is no IT organization. We still need to build it. We have a lot of providers, so which means we will have a lot of contractual interfaces. So working agile would probably work for them, but it will often lead to time and material contracts, so something that procurement does not like. So no. At the end, well, it's not these are not our people, so we need some kind of documentation of what they have delivered. And these guys are not necessarily used or even incentivized to work together. So if we have 4 providers, so cross teamwork, not going to work. So also from a program point of view, we know exactly what to do, in the sense that from a technology point of view, it's not specific to this customer. We're going to the cloud. It's not that nobody has done that before. So it's not easy. It requires very specific expertise, but it has already been solved elsewhere. So it's a complicated program, not necessarily complex or chaotic. It's still the domain of good practices or best practices. From an application point of view, the scope is also clear. Considering the timelines, we're not going to transform a lot. So we don't do extra complicated development. We will just, take the application on one side and instantiate it on the other side. So we can do smart things like re-platforming to the cloud, but the motto remains transition first and transform later. So we don't have weekly meetings with the business to prioritize features or backlogs items. So the scope is very clear. It can be planned. So taking all that into account, we find ourselves very logically in a rather traditional operating model. We function in a classical plan mode now. And the initial shape of the architecture governance is aligned on that. And that's exactly what we need at this moment, right? So, is this the target operating model? Is this the future shape of the architecture office? Probably no, but it is the target operating model that we need in this phase. So we have been engaged at first, we XPLUS, to do the road mapping of the program. And this was the first part of the mission. So here, on the left part of the slide, to bring more structure in the migration scenario, support the program managers to integrate all of the applications in waves. We are not doing a big bang migration, by the way. And the other part of the mission was, of course, to kickstart an architecture governance. So what that means, set up and organize the practice, start driving the architecture documentation, structure and road mapping at the level of the program. And we first had to take the projects in. So obviously they were already, to a large extent, defined. We had to understand their scope, identify key dependencies, identify the need for architecture oversight. And at the same time, we had to lay down the groundwork for architecture and portfolio management from an architecture point of view, so technology portfolio and application portfolio. Where are we today? We are now in a phase where the program architecture office is actually running. So it's been kicked off. We have a structure in place. We have embedded the architecture activities in the existing processes. And the role is more focused on structure, the coordination, the control as part of the program. And the problem we were trying to anticipate and are now solving in this phase is how to scale. Think about it. So 5 months ago, we were in a stage where some activities were starting, but most of the program was really being shaped. So in the beginning, an IT skeleton team is okay, but as soon as the program kicks in and the projects move into delivery, and this is not the case, you need to have a clear way of working, a framework to communicate to all those vendors. This is needed, of course, for the change organization, and that includes architecture. You need guardrails and a way to structure everything. Just to be clear, we're not trying to do solution architecture. We can't. We have in some very specific context, but this is something for the specialists that are being brought in as part of the vendors that are being contracted. So when do we do that? It's a kind of opportunistic, so like a mismatch between the urgency and the vendor onboarding, then we step in. But what is required at this stage and what we are focusing on is clear guidance, principles, roles, templates, a weekly cadence, and a clear framework. So what are the next steps? So you see a timeline here. So the role of architecture will change, will evolve. So the projects are progressing, the bulk of the architecture work is going to be done relatively early in the program. So we don't really have to have a fully defined big architecture dossier up front. But if you have to perform major architecture close to the end of the project, then I think you have a problem. So it's going to happen sooner than earlier. And eventually, applications are going to be transitioned over. At some point in time, the TSA exit program will slowly but surely be completed. And at that moment, the focus of architecture will change. So just imagine the situation from a business point of view. So you've been told as a business leader 2 years ago, looking at your initiative, great idea, but you need to wait a bit because the company is being split. Right? And the situation at the end of the TSA exit will be, and this is starting already now, you are hearing about this brand new and fantastic IT environment that is being set up because it's what the CIO is selling, and he's right. It's true. It's a fantastic new environment. So what do? Well, you take your backlog of 20 years good ideas and you start pitching them to the CEO. And that's going to be the next phase for architecture, a phase where we are going to be able to focus on the business value, long-term strategic evolutions, other big changes. And in the meantime, what will probably happen, that's what you see on the lower side here. The IT operating model, most probably it will evolve too. To integrate more business into IT and probably look to the outside, the ecosystem concepts. How far we will go into that, I cannot tell at this moment. So in conclusion, I think we have been able to add the expected value of an architecture office so far. Architecture is involved in the right conversations. The strategic important ones. And personally, I think we are well positioned and well organized to bring that value in this phase and the next. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Be looking for the question in the chat, and I'm happy to hand over the floor to the next speaker.
Thanks, Laurent. That would be me. I'm sharing my screen now. Voilà. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Here, the last presentation of the breakfast session of today. And here we want to provide you a little bit a canvas, how we see within XPLUS and within UMA, the role of architecture within the digital transformation journey. Because we're not doing architecture just to be architecture, as already explained by Rudi and Laurent. Setting up or improving an architectural practice comes with quite some challenges. And we want now to stress out which role architecture can play in a digital transformation journey. Voilà. What you see here is a little bit the digital transformation journey, how we at XPLUS and UMA have visualized it. And what we want to present now today is, to give you an insight in the role that architecture plays in each of these process steps. So, what we often see, and I think what also Rudi explained in the P&V case, is that for the moment, the architecture often plays only a role, let's say, in the solution architecture, in the change architecture. That's what we see often in companies nowadays, that the main focus is, let's say, almost 100% focusing on change architecture. That's, of course, a main and stays a main important value driver, but it's only a part of the value drivers that we see within a digital transformation journey. And often even within, let's say, the change architecture, we often see that it's only focused on preparing the transformation. That's really, let's say, delivering the solution architecture and then drop it off to the next actor in the process. But There's also not a lot of focus often on, okay, deliver the transformation, being sure when it's deployed that the value is realized. So also these, let's say, other process steps within the change architecture part are not really always taken care of. And what I see within my experiences within Fortis also is indeed that the change architecture stays, let's say, the most one of the most important value drivers. But the thing what we try to do, for example, at within BNP Paribas Fortis, is indeed to make some time, to free up some time for the whole community. So for the all within Fortis 70, 80 architects to also have some time, 10-20% of your quarterly time to spend that on other value drivers. So change architecture stays an important value driver, but we want to shift a little bit more, also as Rudi said, towards other value drivers, as there, for example, are the roadmap and portfolio, and also there architecture should play a role. Of course, you should have the time in order to invest in that. And also at Fortis, we see, okay, more and more for all architects, we spend a little bit of our time also on the roadmap and portfolio exercises. We make, for example, in the roadmap case, some domain blueprints where we try to envision, let's say, okay, what is coming forwards to us in the coming 3 to 5 years? What are the challenges? What can we do about it? Also, the yearly portfolio exercises. We try to be included in the process to give insights when they are doing the yearly portfolio exercise to say, okay, for all the projects or initiatives selected, okay, what are the added values to go for that one and not for that one. So that's also there another value driver that is quite important, and where we see more and more shifts also within the other companies where we are active, that there is a shift from focusing only on change architecture within architectural practice towards the other value driver here, roadmap and portfolio. Another value driver that is important but is even more difficult, let's say, to grasp is bringing some added value as an architect in the value discovery phase. And then we are really, let's say, at the beginning of the digital transformation journey. And so then we are here when we are talking about, okay, what are the objective goals, strategies, what is the vision, even in that phase, let's say before a project has become a project, when it's still an ideation phase, architecture can and should also play a role in the value discovery part. So what is the value behind this idea? And also there at Fortis, we try to bring some added value. Of course, that is a less, let's say, less worked out than the other two value drivers. Here, for example, we try to play a role within IT strategy boards, where also the architect tries to give, let's say, the insights why a certain possible project could add value towards the organization, towards the IT organization, and towards the customer as a whole. So that's a little bit, let's say, the value drivers that we see and that play an important role throughout the whole digital transformation journey. So where we see clearly, okay, focus today is often only on change architecture, and we should evolve to the other value drivers. And what important is to say, when I look at my own experience at BNP Paribas Fortis, is indeed that time that we get is the time all architects get it. So it's not only a few, let's say, enterprise architects that focus on these other two value drivers. Let's say in an ivory tower that we have 2-3 people that focus on the roadmap portfolio and the value discovery. No, it's really all architects, the whole community, get 10-20% of their time to spend on these other value drivers. And to be honest, it's not only spending the 10 to 20% on these other value drivers, but also, and that's the next slide, also spending on the core building blocks in order to improve your architectural practice. So we have here on top the value drivers, as I just explained. But it's also important to improve your practice itself. And there we have the core building blocks that we see always passing by, namely the tools, processes, and the people. Okay, when we look at this from an architectural perspective, the architectural documentation and tooling is, of course, quite important. So that's also something when I look at Fortis, where we invested a lot in the previous years. as a whole community, we invest a lot in to have a proper tool, to have a common methodology, Archimate to use, creating viewpoints that are clear for the other stakeholders. And when we explain the architecture to other stakeholders, that we can use different viewpoints depending on the actor in front of us, so that we can clearly communicate the solution, the architecture that we drafted here. Also here, let's say within the architectural documentation and tooling, you can work out reference architectures. Okay, you need to invest in them, but they help you in order to also spend less time in the change architecture part, so that you indeed free up some time, so that you indeed can also spend again more time in for the other value drivers, the value discovery and the roadmap and portfolio. So that's something that in Fortis we really worked upon hardly in the previous years. Also, the process part is of course an important role, as you should always review, okay, the processes and the procedures that you have in place. Also, to give an example, what we have done at Fortis is, okay, in the past we had every change documentation that was drafted needed to be reviewed, validated by a governance board. It was a lot of time spent, and also, of course, it takes a lot of throughput time before finally an architecture is really delivered and can be implemented. There also it was decided, okay, I think just as Rudi said at P&V, okay, you should validate it at the correct level. So we also empowered, let's say, the lead architects and the tribe architects to validate the change architecture itself if it were below a certain threshold, so that we indeed only have, let's say, the bigger, most important change architectures validated by a governance board, and that all the rest could be done, let's say, on a lower level. And that was, let's say, we increased, let's say, the throughput time through to that. And then really another important aspect is indeed, okay, for we also need to, let's say, let the architects grow. Okay, you can do that, of course, by trainings, etc. But it's a lot more than that. And what we see is indeed all the things that we deliver here in the documentation and tooling, in the processes. Okay, we also inform, let's say, the architecturals, or you should inform the architects via some community working, a guild, where you indeed inform them about that new reference architecture, these new processes, so that they are aware of that, so that they can also indeed, when doing the change architecture, spend less time on it. What we also see, when I go a little bit maybe indeed back here for the change architecture, is indeed you can also let them grow indeed by not focus 100% of their time on just creating a solution architecture, the change architecture. They can also evolve in their roles. So they can also, next to the solution architecture work they can evolve, let's say, towards a more enterprise architecture role, partially, where they also will focus on, okay, how to deliver the transformation, realize the value, etc. So that's also, let's say, the growing part is also in there. Yep. What is important is also the block in the middle, of course. And when setting up, let's say, this architectural practice, you always should have in mind, let's say, the IT organization or the organization as such in which you embed your architectural practice. That is, of course, an important element. Also, to give the example of Fortis, where we did that embedding, let's say, top down, when BNP Paribas Fortis went in 2016-17 for an agile way of working. Okay, we tried to adapt our architectural practice on that way of working. In 2019, it was fine-tuned with an agile impulse. We also again fine-tuned our own processes, our own practice top down. And what we do now really recently is indeed from bottom up, by indeed identifying ourselves and what is our backlog, where can we improve. Also, we try to fine-tune still that embedding of our architectural practice within the organization. So that's for me a little bit the story that I wanted to give, and I think one of the most important takeaways is, okay, it's important that they say, as a practice as a whole, that you become, let's say, a learning practice, self-learning. And so the fact that indeed you give the architects the time to invest in other value drivers or to invest in improving the practice as a whole. That will help you as complete architectural practice to go to the next steps of the digital transformation journey, and to be sure that you deliver, let's say, value throughout the whole digital transformation journey, and that you don't get stuck just in keep on creating that solution architecture and not taking into account the other steps of the digital transformation journey. Well, that was my story.
Thank you, Frederic and Laurent and Rudi, ready for the inspiring stories. We have some time left for some questions, and there are some pressing ones. First, Frederic, there's the question on, you've emphasized that taking decision and validating takes considerable amount of time, which we all know, we're all architects. How do you guarantee the timeliness of decisions? And how do you mitigate overthinking?
How do you guarantee? I didn't capture that.
The timeliness of decisions, whether decisions arriving in time in order for the rest of the process to function.
Okay, so why that architecture doesn't become a blocking point, let's say, for that indeed. But that's also, that's mean what we often see nowadays. Indeed, they come to the architecture in order to deliver that solution architecture, and then indeed it's a little bit, let's say, okay, it is planned, but let's say on a quarterly basis, you know, just before the quarter, okay, I need to work on the next quarter on these and these topics. So that's okay, that's already something, because you have a planning, but it's not ideal. And indeed, if you are involved, let's say, earlier in the digital transformation journey, you're aware already, even when a project is ideation, or even when we are doing our yearly portfolio exercise, you already are more aware upfront, even before it becomes a project, or 1 year before it will become a project, you're already aware of your of the backlog that is coming. So I think that's indeed, it helps you also to prioritize and to be sure that indeed you can ensure the domains or your client that you're working for, that you will deliver the architecture in time. So I think that's also an important one. So if you are involved in the earlier steps, let's say, of the journey, you will also have a more and a clear and better view of what is coming up to you, and you can also be sure that you can deliver it on time, so that you're not a blocking factor in the whole journey.
So anticipation of what is coming is a crucial capability of the architects. Rudi, I have another pressing question for you. Since we're all architects, you made a statement about one capability on one asset. And without going into a lengthy discussion on it, can you just shine a light why you at P&V are taking that position? You're on mute, Rudi, you're on mute.
So now I'm back. Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, I said it. It's an ambition. You have to understand it in this way. And maybe also a little bit what is the rationale behind it. P&V did also in the past some mergers, acquisitions. Okay, other insurance. And at a certain time, you have at least double assets for the same capability. And I say at least. Okay, and then you have a change track that has to be managed. And we have positioned this as a principle. We try to have one asset for a capability. We take this along in a pragmatic way. If we are working with packages, okay, the principle stays, we implement it out of the box. So it is an adopt way of doing, and then at that moment you are forced to go in a capability, maybe multiple assets. But when we control it, we try to go this way. And why do we do this? It's about reusability. It's about reduced TCO. It's about a reduced complexity when you are doing integrations, because everything is tied together. The effort for change is then less, and it's also about continuity. But because if you have multiple assets in other technologies, you have to foresee also that the competences stay aboard. And that are the main reasons why we position this as an ambition, a goal, but approaching it in a pragmatical way.
Then a question from my side. Do you have it's a sort of decision making that in the context of at the same time changing business transformations that need to happen or difficult decisions, does your new governance model, IT operating model, where you're working closely with the business, help in making the right decisions in that way?
It helps because as the enterprise architects are working on the portfolio level with the portfolio director, with the CPO together, there is more awareness and there is an open discussion about it. Where in the past we had only solution architects on the place for the change and run, and let's put the solution in place and we continue. And now we have that open discussion and we are creating the awareness why we should look in this way. Also that it stays consistent. But enterprise architecture are positioned within the highest level in each portfolio, and they have as much speak up rights as the business now, and that was not in the past.
Which I think is a good evolution. Eh?
That's I think we have made a huge step forward in coming to a sound enterprise architecture at the P&V Group in this way.
Yeah. Since there are not any more questions, although we still have time for one. From Jean-François, Frederic, in the agile context, how do you practically implement the control function of enterprise architecture? It is how to identify deviations and to verify that epics align to strategic intents, architecture decision, and standards. How does that work in the BMP context?
There is still some room for improvement there, but indeed, as I mentioned here, it's part of the change architecture. It's not only indeed delivering the solution architecture, but you should also make sure, and we tried it in the past, but it didn't work really. It was not really implemented, to make some gating at the end, let's say, before something goes towards production, before something is deployed, that you do a gating in order to see also, okay, what you described in the architecture, is it really, let's say, developed, will it be deployed as such? So that's a kind of gating that should be ideally be there in order to make sure indeed that the architecture is followed. And it's not only also the gating itself, but just coming at the end after the developers have done their work. It's also, of course, while they are, let's say, while they are developing, also assisting them, being part of, we call it Scrum of Scrums sessions, where then also you can also still go a little bit more in detail into the architecture that you drafted, to help them on the way. But then indeed, a gating should be, let's say, or could be an option in order to make sure that that the architecture is followed. I don't know if that's an answer.
Jean-François, is that an answer to your question? It is an answer. Yep. Okay. So I think we can bit by bit close down the session. Now, before we close, I want to quickly draw your attention to the topic of growing architects, as Frederic mentioned. It's first and foremost making sure that in your organization, you organize yourself in making sure people acquire the necessary knowledge. But at the same time, there's the thing of training. There are trainings available, and what I invite you is to check out our new schedule for our open practice trainings, and at the same time, the preparations for the executive master, the next year of the executive master that we work together on with AMS is in the works. So we'll distribute a folder about it together with the material. so that you can have a look at it. Now, to close the session, I want to thank, first of all, Rudi, Laurent, and Frederic for the inspiring presentations. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact us, contact me via the mail address that is on the next slide, Frederic, if you show it. And don't forget to follow us on the LinkedIn pages, especially for the next breakfast session that will be somewhere around end of May. I think it's the 31st of May we set as a date on another interesting topic. And then I've left nothing more than wishing you a very good day. For those in the banking sector, a very good long weekend, because they already start with the weekend tomorrow. And for the rest of us, good weekend, and probably for some of us, very nice holidays during the Easter holidays. Hopefully we see you in the next session. Many thank you and bye-bye.